Invent yourself, and then reinvent yourself. Don't swim in the same slough.
You're probably going to either love or hate this one, folks. Pretty sure. Just as you probably either love or hate Holga cameras. Because I'm going to show you, beginning to end, how I went from this to this. Now a bit of background before we really get going. This is not going to be a primer on Holga cameras, folks. There's about 1 billion videos on YouTube for that. Basically, Holga cameras are a series of cameras that were produced from 1982, I think was when the first Holga came out, all the way up to now. Here we are in the foul year 2023. Essentially, they're known as toy cameras, although I'm not sure what toy camera really means. In short, they're plastic-bodied cameras. Virtually all of them have plastic lenses. Aside from a few, there's I know 40 some odd iterations of Holgas of varying formats, varying designs. Some of them are medium format, some of them are 35mm 135 format, and some of them are 110. There's some microfilm ones. You get the point. There's a lot of Holgas out there. This particular one, name is Olga. This is my Holga 120 pan 6x12. It is a panoramic Holga. That is why I got it. I was about a year ago really thinking about getting into panoramic photography, the wide format photography, and I was thinking about going with maybe a Noblex 150, a wide Lux 120. Those cameras are not exactly cheap. They're great cameras, but I didn't want to invest in something I would end up using once and hating, so I went with this little $100 miracle. These are going about $99 right now, brand new from what I can gather, and I didn't go back. However, like all Holga cameras, this one is a little nuanced. In fact, that's what most people use a Holga camera for, is because it produces a very unique image, especially with the 6x6 formats like the 120N Holgas. It has a lot of vignetting, a lot of aberrations to it, usually fairly sharp in the center, but the rest of it is slightly out of focus, and it just looks like a Holga. That's why a lot of them are so popular nowadays. Holga's cameras have had a resurgence in maybe the last 20 years. That beautiful bastard, David Burnett, he more or less put it back on the map with his coverage of the 2000 presidential campaign. Very famous pictures made with his Holga. But before I get too much into the weeds, folks, let's get back to what we're going to be doing here today with the 120 pan 6x12 format. That is a 6cm by 12cm wide frame. It's literally double the width of, let's say, a 6x6 Hasselblad frame, that 1-to-1 square format. So picture two 1-to-1 squares, put them together. That is a 6x12 frame. The 120 pan is very unique amongst Holgas, namely because some people say it is too good. I wouldn't go that far, but I am inclined to agree to some extent, and I definitely know what they're talking about. Again, Holgas have a very uniquely visualized picture. This one doesn't have a lot of that. It's a very sharp lens. This is a 90mm f8 to f11, depending on what setting you have it on. And it's very sharp. It still has the little vignetting around the peripheral of the frame and a little bit of that blur. However, given the nature of the 6x12 format, it lacks a lot of that core Holga-ness, I suppose. I think that's why a lot of people don't care for the 6x12. Personally, I love it. However, there's just a few things that I want to fix, all the while keeping the lens itself. I love this plastic 90mm lens. I don't want to do anything with that. However, there's a few other little points of the camera, some of them aesthetic, some of them technical, that I am going to fix. If not fix, definitely modify. And I'm going to talk about that right now. So I'm going to go around the camera, tell you what I'm going to do, and then break it up into sections showing exactly how I do it. Starting off with the rear of the camera, a lot of the things are going to revolve around this rear door. I'm going to add a frame counter cover. I'm going to add a film index card holder. We are going to add a set of my permanent light seals. I've done quite a few cameras with this. There's quite a few videos. I'll link to at least one of them up here showing how I make permanent light seals permanent for multiple cameras. This one's going to be a little bit different, very interesting, but also very easy. So we're going to be doing that. And the Holga, as I mentioned, the frames, or the images rather, that come out of it, they are very blurred around the edges, sharp in the middle. They have some vignetting. Some of that's caused by the lens, but a lot of it is actually caused by the physicality of the film and how it lays in the back of the camera. This does not draw the film very tight. The back does not have a pressure plate, so the film can kind of bow. It's not exactly flat up against the intended film plane, so that can give you a lot of weird geometric anomalies that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. However, I think a lot of that, at least the way I like it, comes from the lens. So we're going to work to flatten out the film by adding some little pressure points to the rear of the door. I suppose that would be the interior of the rear door. Moving around to the front of the camera, we're going to add a filter attachment to the front of this lens. This lens is not threaded. That means you can't use filters unless you have a specialized Holga adapter to go on the front. Those used to be available. I'm not sure if they're available new anymore, but there's a lot of folks out there doing a lot of 3D printing that pretty sure you can get maybe a 100mm square adapter for this. But we're going to do it this way so we never have to worry about that again. I'm also going to make it where you can do long exposures with a cable release with our Holga 120 pan. This camera has a bulb and an N mode. The N is just the automatic shutter mode. It's about 1/100th of a second. But the bulb mode, that's when you depress the shutter, and as long as that is held down, the shutter stays open. So you could take an infinitely long exposure on this, but you have to hold down the lever. And that can add a lot of camera shake, even if you're on a tripod. However, that makes a little prickly situation, because once I put that little attachment on there for the cable release, I'll only be able to use it with the cable release. I won't be able to get my finger in there and use it with the automatic shutter. And I definitely don't want to lose that functionality. So I'm going to add a little shutter extension on there. That may be a little involved. We're going to have to more or less figure that out as we go, but I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm going to do. The viewfinder on the Holga 120 pan is actually really, really good. I don't know, it's definitely not coupled with the lens at all. It's just a standalone optical viewfinder, but I wear glasses or contacts, and when I'm wearing my glasses, a lot of times I bang that up against either the frame or the element of my glasses. I don't want that. So I've got a little viewfinder cup I'm going to put on there. It's going to take a little bit of fitment, but it should be fairly easy. That way we'll have a little bit of a cushion so I don't break my glasses. I've got some self-adhering leatherette that I'm going to put on the front of the camera, really just an aesthetic thing. However, it will add a little extra grip there. That should be fairly straightforward. I'm not exactly sure whether or not I'm going to put it on the back, because once I get that frame counter cover on, once I get the film index card, I think it may actually look better having that contrast black with the, I got orange, it looks kind of light brown, but with the orange and the black, I think that would actually look fairly cool. And if I don't put it on the back, I won't have to worry about cutting out for the frame counter and the film index card. So we'll just play that by ear, because I can always add that on there. But yeah, definitely going to put leatherette on the front. We're going to cover up the Hotshoe mounts. We're not going to take them off, but I'm going to cover them up where it's going to be a little more aesthetically pleasing, because I never use these, honestly, except for maybe mounting a GoPro on there. And the other big thing, well, not big thing, but easy thing we're going to do is the Holga strap here. I use that word loosely. Is, even for what it is, really is a piece of garbage. These little clips here constantly come off. I think it's funny, they come off all their own, but they're hard to get off now. So I've got some little triangle strap attachment points I'm going to put on here, little clasps. They're going to stay on there because that's what helps close the back. We'll see how the light seals play into these clasps. Over time it may bend them out, I don't know. We'll cover that when we actually put the light seals in. So yeah, that's the rundown on the list. Let's get to work. Start with the back. Now, light leaks are not a big problem, at least on this model of the Holga 120 pan, as they are with other Holgas. That's really just caused by the fitment of the door. Maybe I've just got a good one where the door fits on there fairly snug. That's one thing I've never really got on board with any of the Holgas, are the light leaks. I don't think, at least for my opinion, they don't really help too much. So we're going to add in our permanent light seal, super simple, made out of yarn. Again, there are many of these videos I have on the channel in the playlist. I think it's camera modifications or something like that. Usually it goes on a little track inside the rear of the body of most cameras, and the door will swing over onto that. However, with this one, the easiest thing to do is actually put them into the rear door. The door has a continuous track all the way around the perimeter here, and all we're going to do, take our yarn and press that down into that track. It holds itself in there in most cases, as long as there's no burrs on this, and I've already went around there. That's really smooth. But no glue, nothing to really disintegrate. And this cotton yarn, folks, I put permanent in air quotes because, you know, what is permanent? But hypothetically, it should last for the life of the camera, maybe even the life of you. But put the yarn in there, and you don't have to worry about light seals ever again. Now, the one thing I told you I was worried about, until especially this has time to settle and seat in there, it may make the door fit a little tight. That may end up bending off these or bending out these little pressure plates on the side there. That's something I can always bend them back, but we'll worry about that when we get there. So I'm going to take our yarn, put it in this little track. Took us off the time lapse, folks, just to show you what I'm doing here with the yarn. Super simple. Just going along the track, a tiny screwdriver, and tucking that right down in there. We're going to go all the way around till it meets up with our end. Be sure that butts up really nice. Tuck it down in there, and that'll be it. All right, it's all the way around. Going to nip the tip. And then just tuck that little pigtail right down in there. Pretty perfect. Now it's seated in. Don't worry about going through and trying to tuck it down all the way to be sure it's all the way in there. That will be done by the camera itself. We are now going to add those two little foam stoppers, or I guess pressure pads, if you want to call them that, to the camera door, the inside of the camera door. What that is going to hopefully do is add tension to the medium format film spool as it's put in the camera. The spool goes in here, it's pulled over to the take-up spool. Those pads, once the door is back on there, will hopefully press down on this side, add tension to the spool as it's pulled across, help flatten it out, keep it uniform across the focal plane. And then as the take-up spool builds up, that pad will kick in, do the exact same thing to keep everything nice and tight. At least that's the idea. To do this, the majority of folks, I should say this, all the stuff we're using here is either Amazon or things that you can find locally at a hardware store, big box store, or both. So this is not some kind of exotic fix that I'm going to show you. For our pressure pads, I have this insanely big roll of 3/4 inch wide, 3/8 inch thick, little sealing foam put around doors and windows. Like I said, had to get way too much of it. It's still super cheap. I'm going to cut off two pieces, at least two pieces, and put one here on the door. It's self-adhering. We'll see how long that lasts. My only qualm is it may be too thick. I should have got a thinner, maybe like a 1/4 inch or something. But if anything, I can just shave that off. So yeah, let's cut out a little pieces, stick them right there on the door. Cut out a couple of extra ones just to have them. Like I said, folks, we may change these up a little bit. We shall see. Before we actually stick these guys on the door, I'll clean it off a little bit with a little alcohol pad. Not necessarily mean for that to happen, but that fits pretty nicely in there. Put one there. Just put one there. As far as placement, I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera. There's a little angle on the back of the film door here. I'm butting up these foam pads just to the edge where that angle begins going vertical. And I already know this is going to be something that we'll just have to keep adjusting, but they do compress really well. And I'm wondering if that actually would be pretty good. Like I said, we can always trim them down if we need to. And there are our little friction stops. Now, all Holgas, as far as I know, have a frame counter selector. Essentially, it's just a cover that lets you choose, maybe, yeah, lets you choose the position of the frame counter so you can see the back paper of the film, the backing paper of the 120 film, that is, the medium format film, so you can see how many frames you're on. Now, with the 120 pan, you always have it set on 12. We went back to the Hasselblad 6x6. This is 6x12. So normally you would get 12 6x6 frames on a roll of 120 medium format film. Since you're doubling that, you only get half to a roll, so 6. Always have that set on 12. I think this is kind of ubiquitous to all the Holga cameras, so they put it on this one too. So that's always going to be set on 12. So I'm not going to be worried about moving the camera. The reason I'm moving the frame counter, that is, the reason I bring it up is because once I put these little bad boys on there, our little covers, it's going to be really hard to get to that selector switch. So just throwing that in there. Now these little covers, guys, again, this is genius. These are webcam covers for laptops. I know they're little electronic devices. Got a little door on there. Springs up, latches. We're going to stick that right on the back here. One of the big things with light leaks, this is the source of it. Little red ruby lith window there. Especially in bright sun, especially if you're shooting higher ISO film, anything over 400. I've had a lot of trouble shooting color film, like Portrait 400, in this out in the desert, the American Southwest. So having this little cover on there will still let me see my frames while hopefully keeping it closed down to literally seal off any light from this little window. Now, I'm not sure exactly what orientation I'm going to put in this. Again, it's going to come down to whether or not I'm going to cover the back with that little leatherette, but I'm thinking maybe vertical is going to work the best, so I can just more or less have my thumb in the orientation it is when I'm shooting and just flick that up. These are self-adhering. I think I got these off of Amazon. It's either Amazon or eBay, I think. Maybe one of the things I got off of eBay. One of the two things. But it's self-adhering, so I'm going to peel that off, stick it on there. I heard these were a little troublesome as far as staying adhered. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. If anything, we can just glue it. So yeah, let's do this. There you have it. Be kind of careful with it until that adhesive sits. And now we have the little frame counter cover. Pretty nifty. Next, we're going to add our film index card holders. For sure, I got these off of eBay because they took forever to come in. These are not 3D printed. They look extremely OM. They're very nice, relatively cheap. Again, it took a while to get these in. They came from overseas. I went with these over some others I had saw on like Etsy, a few other places, because those were all 3D printed. Nothing against it. It just looked very rough. You can see the lines from the 3D printer in there. This one looks like something you just pulled off another camera. So this is going to go right in this nifty little square that Holga already had on there, reminding you what film to try to use in the camera, 400 speed. But with this, we don't have to worry about that. We can just slide the card in, and that's going to be it. This has a little slot up top. I think I'm going to orient that just as such. This is self-adhering too, and we'll just see how that adhesive holds. If anything, let's put a little dollop of glue on there, and that should be it. Hopefully it's not going to be quite as hard to pull off, and it's not, as that frame counter cover. There we go. Make sure I put it on there how I want to. I've already cleaned that off, by the way. And that will sit on there as such. Folks, that really does just look like it was made on there. Pretty nice. Like I said, we'll see how that glue does. Might end up having to glue both of these down. Who knows? But for right now, looks all right. As I said before, the Holga cameras, whether it be the 90mm lens on our 120 pan or the 60mm lens on the 6x6 cameras like the 120Ns, they're not threaded. That means you can't use filters, you can't use a hood, anything that you would screw onto the lens, it's not threaded, so you can't do that. If you don't have the other attachments, like I said, it looks kind of clunky, it can block some stuff, but it's a very easy fix. And I want to note, I got this from another person, Dennis Oliver. He has a blog, I'll link to it down in the description. He's the one that gave me the idea, well, a few other these ideas as well, to simply put a 46 to 49mm step-up ring directly onto the lens of the Holga. You don't need to thread it because it's going to self-thread with the adapter ring. So this will let you use anything like a screw-on filter, a circular polarizer. In my case, I shoot a lot of black and white filters from a black and white film. It's going to let me put a 49mm filter right on there, and I'll show you in just a second a few other little attachments that would necessitate having a threaded ring on your lens. Again, no glue. I'm hoping this will stay on there pretty solid. Remember, you can always add glue. It's going to be a lot harder to take it away. So all I'm going to do, get this as flush as I can. These are the threaded sides of our 46 to 49mm step-up ring. Set them on there as such. And then press very firmly, holding the lens. That should bite right into that plastic. I'm going to go this really, really far. Don't take a chance on splitting anything. It already feels extremely solid in there. Keep on turning. Made me nervous. There we go. That is in there. Extremely level. All right. Well, it was made on there. So again, that will let us use a lens cap like so. We don't have a filter on there. That will let us use a lens hood screwed in just like that. Now there's two reasons I've got the hood. One, of course, the obvious. This is a rubber extendable hood. We talked about how the 120 pan lacks some of that Holga charm. That would be plenty of hood as is, just retracted. However, I think if I pull that out, that will add quite a bit more vignetting if I want to, so I'll definitely be experimenting with that. And the great thing about it is I can screw, got a 21 orange filter here, I can screw a filter directly onto the hood, or lose the hood completely. There's our orange filter. We can just pop the cap on just like that. You don't have to worry about taking on any other attachments. We can just leave that on there all the time. And truth be told, folks, I'll probably be leaving that orange filter on there all the damn time. Very cool. Maybe one of the favorite modifications I do the entire camera. this is where things begin to get just a little bit tricky. We're going to add our viewfinder Eyecup. There's about 2 billion of these available online, guys. Range of cameras, range of applications. I went with this one from Amazon. It's for a D5200 viewfinder. This is one part I want to give you some measurements, because the reason I haven't given you any thus far is because a lot of this stuff, for one, don't necessarily need it, and two, I'm not sure how tight the tolerances are on the Holgas. But just to help you out with getting your viewfinder Eyecup, the viewfinder of the Holga, the rear part here, I'm talking about the edges here of the plastic from side to side and from top to bottom. Side to side, roughly 180 millimeters. Top to bottom, about 150 millimeters. So 180 millimeters by 150 millimeters. That is the external measurements of the Holga 120 pan viewfinder. And I tell you that because when you're looking around, some people list the dimensions, some don't, precisely listed anyway. And this is going to help you kind of weed out and get something that you know for sure is going to fit. With mine, I know I'm going to have to modify this a bit. Namely, these little tiny rubber sections here, I'm going to trim those off, get it to fit more flush against the camera. And I'm probably going to build up little sections with this, it's not electrical tape, but it's rubberized tape, to make sure we have a snug fit around there, because I'm going to glue the viewfinder cup on there, and once it's on there, it's gonna be kind of hard to get off, so I'm gonna make sure I do it right. Don't want any gaps in between there. I want to give us a much cleaner look, plus not add any distractions from having light pouring in from the viewfinder once we have the cup on there. So yeah, let's put on the Eyecup. So yeah, as I said, tad tricky. The eyepiece is on there. Actually went through 2. I had a spare, thank God. And yeah, definitely on there. Went a little easy with the glue, because I've got a feeling I will eventually be switching that out. Shouldn't be a big deal just to peel this E6000 cement off of there, hopefully, once I can get underneath an edge. But it's definitely on there. It doesn't look half bad. I don't know. Still got some gaps in there, but hey, for our purposes, Eyecup is in place, and I think it'll actually work just fine. And oh boy, this is going to be the major, well, technically major, mechanical modification we're going to do to old Holga here, the Holga 120 pan. That is add in our cable release attachment. Going to talk in depth about that in just a second. And we're going to have to add in our shutter lever extension. Probably going to be the most labor intensive part of it, folks. I'm not going to lie to you, because we've got to get the shutter extension in there. Got to have that mounted on very firmly before we can even put our cable release attachment on there, because if we don't, we're not going to know where to put this in relation to the thickness of that little extension, all that good stuff. So yeah, got to do the extension first, then the cable release attachment. But I want to talk to you about the nightmare that this truly was. Had all kinds of little ideas. This is a Alpa shutter button. It's made to be screwed into an Alpa cable release. I had an idea of running all these little attachments down through here, running another 3-inch cable release to where I could have the shutter button up here. Gonna have this little guy on there where we could just screw it in to this cable release attachment when we wanted to use the shutter lever with our finger, and we wanted to use the cable release. We could just take this out, put the cable release in. That turned into being an absolute no-go, because as you'll see here, you put the Alpa shutter button on there, and the plunger does not go anywhere near close enough to being able to impinge on that shutter lever and fire off the shutter. The cable release does not have that problem, so I've sent everything else back. I had 2 right angle extensions and a U-hook extension. Sent that back to B&H. I'm keeping that button because you just never really know what that's going to come in handy for. I've got an idea, any kind of Mark II builds on this, I'm going to incorporate something that's actually going to drill into the shutter mechanism itself, forego this front button altogether, but that's a whole other box of scorpions. So let me go ahead and grab our shutter extension lever so we can start working on that. It's going to be extremely scientific. This is a piece of a windshield wiper off a custom 10 Chevy pickup out front here. It actually caught on fire. Lightning struck a tree next to it. So yeah, this is what we're going to use for our shutter lever extension. We'll get a hacksaw. I'm going to cut this guy off about right here. It's going to leave a nice wide portion for the finger articulation, and then probably cut it off about right there. I may, after I get to looking at this, may heat that up a little bit and bend it to follow the contours of the camera here instead of just sticking straight out. The reason I'm not sure about that is because you don't actually, well, there's no right or wrong way, but generally you don't hold the camera by the body and reach all the way up on the Holga 120 pan here to hit that shutter lever. What you do, keep your left hand where you normally would, then you go up and you hit it, grab the conical portion, and you hit it with your middle finger. Kind of like that. So, I'm not sure. I don't think that needs to be moved back anymore. If I moved it back, I would probably try to get it further back here to where I could hold the camera more traditionally and use my index finger. But, I don't know, that kind of introduces a lot of movement. I just don't know. I think the big thing is go ahead and get that cut and attached. Yeah. I just don't know. I guess you will find out with me here in just a second. It is time to adhere our shutter lever extension to the actual shutter lever. I've got it all fabbed up, polished up. May end up putting some black on there after we get on there. I don't know. I think the chrome will actually look good with the Leatherette once we get that on there. And one point I want to mention here, I started to put the Leatherette on there, but then I didn't want to take the chance of getting it really dirty working with this, so I'm going to do that probably more or less last after we get the lever on there. I want to rough up our shutter lever to make our epoxy hopefully adhere to it a little more solidly. Here we go. Really scuff it up. And we're going to do the same to the underside of the shutter lever extension. Actually going to put some fairly deep gouges in there. They're diamond fine. The body of the Holga is made from ABS plastic. At least that's the growing consensus that I can find online. I'm going to use some JB Weld Quick. Use this stuff for everything. It sets a lot quicker than regular JB Weld. Close enough to being as strong for this application. So we're going to take equal parts JB Weld, mix it up, put a little dollop on that lever, and hopefully clamp it down, let it sit for about an hour, and that'll be enough to hold. I'm a little worried, less so now, about the leverage of that being extended out. Maybe we'll pop that off. I don't know. Like I said, I was going to be more worried about it when we had at least planned on having a longer lever extension. Hopefully that's less of an issue now. I think it'll be fine. The good thing is, once we get the lever on there, get it cured, then we can put the cable release extension or cable release adapter on there. Where did my Q-tip go? There it is. And we will almost be done with the modifications on old Olga here. Binary epoxy, binary steel epoxy. You have the actual, more or less a paste steel powder and a binding / activating agent. This dries to a really dark gray. I'm not so much worried about the aesthetic portion because our cable release adapter is going to sit right on top of it, more or less hide everything. Looks pretty good, and this stuff does set relatively quick, folks. So if there's a point of no return, we are at it. Sorry guys, gotta tilt this where I can see. Don't put too much. All right. On goes our lever. Got the little dollop right there. Don't want to squeeze too much. It seize up the lever. Like I said, folks, I know I'm hiding it from you, but this takes a little precedent. I'll show it to you, I promise. So we can clamp that. Can we? We can. Our lever is fairly well set or cured up. We'll take a chance on going ahead and roughing up the edge right above the levers. Go ahead and put our cable release on there because I noticed my leftover batch of JB Weld here is about like putty at the moment. And I want that because we can have the cable adapter adhering itself directly to the lever. It's got to be adhered to the camera to allow for the plunger to pass through it and then hit the lever to hold everything down. So I think with that putty, or that JB Weld being more or less a putty consistency, I've got to work fast. I think that's going to work to hopefully not let it run. At least that's the plan. You never want to be too prematurely cavalier about this sort of thing. But I think tentatively, mission accomplished. The shutter lever extension is on there. I can just barely wiggle it and feel the button or the lever itself on the Holga moving freely, so I don't think it's seized up or anything. Got our cable release adapter on there, sitting just above it, relatively straight. It's definitely cured up enough to handle the camera. Not enough yet to attempt to articulate that shutter lever. That'll come later. Definitely let this set at least 8 hours. And while we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and finish up old Olga. This is our leatherette that we're going to use for at least the front of the Holga 120 pan. Turned in a little bit of a problem finding one leatherette that was thin enough, that had the texture I wanted, that had the color I wanted, that was self-adhering, and wasn't just outrageously expensive. This is actually faux leather. This is upholstery repair. And the listing said orange. I was hoping for something a little more bright orange, but I think it'll be okay. Anyway, I've got 2 sheets of this off Amazon. It appears thin. I can't exactly remember the thickness, but you want to go, again, as thin as possible. I think this is maybe 3 millimeters, something like that. Anyway, it's very thin. I'm hoping it's going to be okay. Yeah, going to cut it out to fit the front. Here we go. One of the reasons why this is so tricky, that is cutting the leatherette, is because there's a little separation down here at the bottom, maybe 3 millimeters or so beneath the conical portion. So I can't just put panels in there. I mean, I could, but it wouldn't look as clean. So I think I've left a little bit of wiggle room down here. So we're going ahead and try sticking this on there. Like I said, I have 2 sheets, so I have a few tries at this, but it'd be great to get it in one. So I'm going to prep the surface, you know, wipe it off with alcohol, and then stick on our Leatherette. Hopefully that self-adhering adhesive will do the trick. Okay, real quick, for the sake of being thorough, let me show you what we're working with here for the front. The Leatherette is about 121 millimeters lengthwise. About, I think it was, oh man, I think 60? I'll have to remeasure. I think 60 millimeters top to bottom. And this is about 3 millimeter section here. It was 39 millimeters on either side. So yeah, let's hope that'll work. So the camera, the front, I alcoholed it off, got all the nooks and crannies, just blew off some dust. Now guys, this is going to be one of those things to where actually doing the action is going to preempt the filming. So I'm sorry if you can't necessarily see this, but I want to do it from this direction and start with the bottom portion, little skinny thing, to get that tucked in there, and then hopefully everything else will just lay in like clockwork. Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to use, yeah, I think I'll stick with this one. Little plastic tool out of my little tool set here. You've seen me use this thing literally for years now. Ta-da. Little cheap Royce Amazon toolkit I use for all my cameras. Absolutely love it. But the reason I'm pushing it like a car salesman is because it has a bunch of these little plastic things in here. And you don't know how much of a lifesaver these things become until you're doing work like this. It's always a welcomed refreshment when the disaster doesn't strike. Well, not all the way perfect. I'm actually quite proud of how that looks. The only unfortunate byproduct of this, a woeful precipitate, as it were, is that after seeing this Leatherette on the front, probably going to go ahead and want to do that to the back. Almost certainly. Only problem is, like I said, it's going to be a little complicated cutting out the inlets for the film index card holder and the film advance the frame counter cover. Fortunately, I have these spares, so I'm going to use that, hypothetically, each one of those respectively, to trace out the Leatherette after I measure it from side to side and top to bottom, to at least give us an approximation of where we need to carve out those little holes. Now, I'm probably not going to show that. It's going to be a little involved, but I will definitely show you the finished result. Hopefully here, maybe now. Well, the back is not bad. It's not bad. I wish it would have been a little cleaner, especially up top here. But I think once I get everything cleaned up, it's going to be okay. And it is the back, after all. But still, I think it's okay. I'm glad I went ahead and put the Leatherette on the rear, because I think it kind of balances everything out. Now, I've went back and forth with the Hotshoe covers. Take these guys out, and I'll tell you what they are in just a second. You can see it doesn't look just horrible with those being naked like that. It doesn't look very clean, though. Very streamlined. I thought about just painting the metallic portions, the contacts, with this. I know that's going to wear off, so I thought, why not? I'll get some Hotshoe covers, and I originally went with these, just the plain Jane plastic Hotshoe covers. It still shows a little bit of the metal. There we go. I said, not terrible, not bad. Then I noticed that, strangely enough, the Holga 120 pan has a bubble level here, which I use sometimes, but it's not setting flush in the body. I'm not sure how accurate that was. I'm like, well, why not? I'll just get these guys, little Hotshoe covers, rubberized, that have a bubble level built in. Then I got to looking at them, and that bubble level just pushes out. So it's really not that accurate either. I like the looks of the rounded portions, that is, of these bubble levels. I think I'm going to leave those in there for now. I found a few others that are just slanted rubber. I think it's one of the Nikon SLRs. I may get those, or who knows, I may go back with these, but for now, I think I'm just going to leave those Hotshoe covers in there with the bubble level. Doesn't look too bad at all. May eventually cover this built-in bubble level up on the Holga. Not really sure, but for now, it's going to stay. And believe it or not, folks, the last thing, other than one or two little unmentionables we're going to do to the Holga Pan 120, or 120 Pan Holga, is add these little triangular neck strap lugs to the side clips here. That's going to let us put on another strap. I'm actually going to use my strap, the original strap actually, that came on the Nikon F3 SLR, which really doesn't get a lot of time on the old YouTube channel here because I shoot virtually no 135 format film anymore. These little split rings will hopefully go right on to the side of the Holga clasp itself. Pretty cold out here, folks. It's like mid-30s Fahrenheit. Not the best time to do any kind of work that requires a measure of dexterity. Did we get it? We did. So those go on. Little plastic guards go on top of that. Whew. Finally. I ended up having to change those out. There were a few crucial points that I want to cover here at the end, folks, about the Holga modification of the Holga 120 Pan 6x12. Namely, there was a few things I did off camera. I added a little white dot to the distance indicator there at the very top of the camera. I went around, blacked out the white lettering, the optical lens, 90mm writing around the front of the lens, because when you're using filters like this, especially on an uncoated lens, which this is, it's an uncoated plastic lens, you can get a lot of reflections if you're using filters, especially shooting into bright light, and that just helps avoid that. You use a Sharpie to go around and black all that out. Same thing up top here. A few coats of Sharpie, rubbed it in there, and eventually I may just sand that off, put on a little Holga logo up there, but yeah, not too bad for a permanent marker. The biggest problem that I ran into was the shutter extension lever there. For whatever reason, and I thought about this beforehand, it was putting kind of a pincher type pressure on there, and it wasn't letting that lever go all the way down, which you can see now it works fine. So what I did, took the entire front apart here, took the shutter housing out, and just cleaned off that little button. The button actually would just pop out of there. The lever would just pop out of there. If I had to do it over again, I would probably have just taken that off, took the button out, and maybe make this a little cleaner. And cover your ears, some folks, I know you're going to hate me for doing this. I put ever so slightly, I mean just a breath of oil on the edges of that shutter lever, put everything back together, and as you can see, works just fine. And speaking of that, I'll show you in real time how you put the cable attachment to use. Cable release attachment. Screw that in there. Perfection. You can put in bulb mode, lock it down. Shutter will stay open indefinitely for those long exposure shots. And I wanted to mention something that I touched on earlier, and that is what exactly the cable extension adapter is. It's a little specialty brass nut from Lowe's. I'll pop that up on the screen, put all the information down in the description, along with all this other stuff that I've used. And you can literally go to your hardware store and just find that. You don't have to buy an expensive, super advanced adapter or anything. This is just a simple specialty nut that I got here locally. What a concept. I tested the rear door for light leaks. I just shone my headlamp through the back, and I did notice one right here at the very bottom of the frame counter, below the frame counter cover. I just took a piece of my self-adhering felt, put that on there, and that's solved, because I'm not going to be changing up the frame counter at all, so it's not going to hurt anything to put a little piece of felt over it. And that reminds me of something else. I want to clear up something. I knew who he was. I mentioned Dennis Oliver, and he was the one that inspired me to make this cover. He's a French fine art photographer. I have no reason why I was thinking his name was Oliver. It's Olivier, and I suppose that would make him Denny Olivier. So yeah, sorry for people watching that. I butchered his name. I hope you forgive me. But regardless, I put his website down in the description so you can check out his Holga mods, because he does some absolutely chef's kiss work with his Holga. Just a few tiny things to finish up here. I'm thinking, actually I'm virtually certain, these little triangle rings, these split rings for the side of the neck strap mount here on the little sliders, I'm probably going to get rid of those and just replace them with a larger O-ring, because I don't know, I just don't like how they're sitting there. I'm actually a little leery that the weight of the strap might, if I jar it somehow, might just slide that down. I don't think that would happen. I think enough momentum would probably break the camera before that would happen. But anyway, I'm probably going to change those out to just some plain O-rings. And that leads me to something else that I might eventually do. The whole take the door off thing to load the film, to do anything else back there, that is kind of a pain. So at some point, I believe I'm going to just rip off these sliders, cut off that little bit of plastic, and make a hinged door, rear door. Like I said, that's way in the future. I'm going to see how everything else works with it first. But something that I think will remedy a lot of problems with the back door here is just making it a hinged rear door. What else can I tell you? I suppose something worth mentioning is this leatherette, that upholstery leatherette off Amazon. That has been working beautifully. I'm extremely pleased with how the front turned out. Not so much with the rear. I would probably just cover the entire thing and then stick the frame counter and the film index card holder over the top, and then cut out around there for me to actually see the backing paper of that. So I think I made it a lot harder than it had to be. Hey, live you learn. So all that to say, I might end up replacing the back of that just to make it a little cleaner, but knowing me, I probably won't. While I load up the first roll to be put through Olga, since her modification, good Ilford HP5 400 plus, I want to go ahead and address the glaring elephant in the room that no doubt is going to be mentioned down in the comments regardless of me talking about it here. And that is, why do this to the Holga? In the parlance of our times, you can only polish a turd so much, I hear you say. Definitely understand that, guys. I'm not saying this is going to magically transform your Holga into a pristine, super sterile, super sharp, flawless piece of cameratic equipment. And that was never my goal. That's what I want to stress the most. That's why I started out saying that I'm not fixing the Holga. I'm not trying to make the 120 pan even necessarily better. I just want to make it more operational to a point. I truly believe that maintaining the character of the Holga is paramount to why people use a Holga to begin with. They don't want clean. They want character. They want something that is representative of not so much the tool, but of themselves. I think that's a draw with any of these quote-unquote toy cameras. That's why I love them so much anyway. It just takes away another obstacle between you and your pictures. I've even said it on my website, if I could take pictures without a camera, I would. And I think that's why I love the Holga 120 pan, the 6x12. I love my little Imperial Mark 12 flash. To that end, I love my Kodak little Brownie 620 flash, even though I don't use that very much now, that little 6x9 camera. And if I'm being honest with myself, I think some of my personal favorite photographs I have shot with either the little Imperial or the Holga or some other camera that shouldn't hypothetically produce that level of craftsmanship. And like I said, I think that plays into the The zeitgeist of these little cameras makes you wonder, you know, do you actually like the camera and the types of photographs it produces, or do you just like them because they allow you to express yourself more fully on a subconscious level? I don't know. But in a rambling nutshell, I suppose that is why I've made these little modifications to old Olga here. They're going to add to the experience, hopefully without taking away from that little special flavor that these cameras produce so well. So if you watched this far, folks, thank you very much. I do greatly appreciate you, everybody being here. And I want to mention that there's a whole episode I can make on the changes to YouTube's ads that took place back in November of 2023. That's all out of my hands now. If you monetize a video on YouTube, essentially they choose where the ads go. If you're seeing ads in the middle of this video, I can't control it, folks. So that's one of the reasons why I went ahead and set up the channel memberships. And I think for a little than 99 cents a month, you'll get, for one, all the episodes early before they go live. You'll get a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Depending on your tier, there'll be live chats, special member only videos, that kind of thing. The reason I bring that up again is because if we can get the memberships going, I want to get to a place where I can just take the ads off the episodes entirely. No monetizations, no nothing. So you don't have to be looking at all these episodes broken up in the middle, just for some ads that you've got to wait for at least 5 seconds to skip. So like I said, I set it at the bare minimum tier, 99 cents a month, so less than $1 a month. And hopefully before long, we can just get rid of the ads entirely. All right, folks, not much left to say. Thanks again for being here for me and Olga. Well, see you on the next one.